All right, today we're going on one of the most incredible journeys you can possibly imagine, the epic story of life on Earth. We're going to rewind the clock 2 billion years, back to the very first spark, and trace that unbelievable story all the way up to the world we know today. Let's dive in.
And this is where we're starting, 2 billion years ago. It's a number so huge it's almost impossible to wrap your head around, right? But this is the stage, a young primordial Earth, where our story begins.
So, to make sense of this epic, we've broken it down into 4 great acts. First, we'll see the dawn of life in the oceans. Then, the great invasion onto land. After that, the incredible age of reptiles. And finally, the rise of the mammals. That's our roadmap for this journey.
And so we begin with Act 1, the dawn of life. We're going right back to the very beginning, from that chemical primordial soup to the very first simple kinds of animals.
So, around 2 billion years ago, the first cells pop into existence. But right away, we hit one of the biggest mysteries in all of science. We still don't know exactly how non-living stuff, just chemicals, managed to organize themselves into the first living cells. The earliest stages left basically no fossil record, so it's a giant puzzle we're still trying to piece together.
Now, some of these tiny early cells developed a superpower, something that would literally change the entire planet. They could release oxygen. This one little trick began to slowly but surely transform the whole atmosphere. It was a real game changer, paving the way for, well, everything else.
And you gotta remember, evolution was not a sprint. It was an ultra-marathon. It took hundreds of millions of years for those simple single cells to start clumping together and become multicellular. Then, fast forward to about 500 million years ago, and we've got active invertebrates swimming around. And then, around 350 million years ago, the first jawless fish probably show up on the scene. It's a slow, steady climb.
Okay, Act 2. For over 1 billion years, life was an aquatic-only club, but that was all about to change. Now we get to witness one of the most monumental moments in history, the great invasion of the land.
So who were the first brave pioneers to step out onto this new frontier? Well, it wasn't an animal. It was the plants. Around 320 million years ago, things like simple seaweeds were the first to make the leap, transforming barren rock into a brand new green world.
And you know, once the plants set up shop, the animals weren't far behind. For the first time, there was a reason to leave the water. There was food, opportunity, and no aquatic predators. The stage was set.
The key link here, the creature that bridged the gap between sea and land, was a group of fish called the Lobefins. They had these thick, beefy fins that could actually support their weight and let them move on land. And get this, we thought they were extinct for millions of years, until a fisherman caught one, a coelacanth, in 1938, a living fossil. These were the direct ancestors of the first amphibians.
Amphibians were a huge leap, but they still had one foot in the water, so to speak. They had to lay their eggs in it. This is where the reptiles pulled off a stroke of genius. The thick-shelled egg. Think of it like a personal, portable pond for the embryo, protecting it from drying out. This was the key that finally, truly unlocked life on land.
And with that key, reptiles didn't just move onto land, they owned it. And that brings us to Act 3, the age of reptiles. An era of dominance that lasted for an almost unimaginable stretch of time.
200 million years. Just let that number sink in for a second. For 200 million years, reptiles were the undisputed kings of this planet. Their dynasty was one of the longest and most successful the Earth has ever seen. And I mean, their takeover was total. On land, of course, you had the mighty dinosaurs. But some reptiles actually went back to the water, evolving into these incredible fish-like forms like the ichthyosaurs. They lived in a world that looked totally alien to us, covered in giant ferns. Of all the incredible land reptiles, one name just thunders above the rest, doesn't it? Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king. He was the apex predator of his time, an absolute giant among giants.
To give you an idea of just how big we're talking, a T-Rex stood about 20 feet tall. That's taller than a modern giraffe. It was an absolute monster, the king of a prehistoric kingdom.
So for 200 million years, they ruled. And then, around 65 million years ago, they were just gone. The dinosaurs suddenly vanished from the face of the Earth, closing one of the most spectacular chapters in the story of life. Which, of course, leads to the great mystery. What happened? Where did they all go? Honestly, we still don't know for sure. It's one of history's great whodunits. Some scientists point to massive climate change.
Others have this fascinating idea that most dinosaurs didn't really die out at all. They just evolved into the birds we see flying around today. The real answer might even be a bit of both.
The fall of one dynasty always means the rise of another. And that brings us to our final act, the rise of mammals. This is the ultimate underdog story, the tale of the small creatures who lived in the shadows and finally got their time to shine.
You see, while those giant reptiles were shaking the ground, the very first mammals were already there. But they were tiny, shrew-like creatures. Their fossils show they were small, probably scurrying around at night, just trying not to get stepped on.
But these little guys had some secret weapons. They were viviparous, meaning they gave live birth and protected their young inside the mother's body. And this is crucial. They were smarter, better at sensing and getting away from danger. So when the world changed and the reptiles disappeared, these traits gave mammals the winning edge they needed to take over.
The story of mammals is also a story about the Earth itself. As the continents drifted, mammal populations got separated and then remixed. For instance, when North and South America eventually connected, the unique mammals from the South were mostly outcompeted by the newcomers from the North. But over in Australia, total isolation allowed its pouched mammals, the marsupials, to thrive without any competition at all.
And out of this explosion of mammalian life, one particular story emerges that, according to the source material we're looking at, is called the most successful story of all: the evolution of humans with our wild language skills and self-consciousness.
So from a single cell in a primordial ocean to a species that can look back and tell this very story, it's been an absolutely wild 2 billion-year ride. Which leaves us with one final fascinating question to ponder. What will be the next chapter in life's epic story?